Hello, hello. Welcome back to Empathetic Educators. I'm your host, Naomi Toland, and I'm very happy to have Conall Doherty on the show today, coming back from my hometown of Derry. We had Shane on a couple of weeks ago, and we're back on with Conall, a good friend of mine. So let's get our show on the road. So we are coming to the end of season 3. We've had some amazing guests on, and we've been looking at the focus of accountability and challenge. And we actually had our final live with our focus guest, Richard Gerver, and amazing chats from all around the world, people in education, people not in education, just talking about how we can hold ourselves accountable and how we can deal with times of change, which has been completely a focus for the past year, at least for most of us. So you can catch up on that bit.ly/Richard Gerver live, where you can see all those insights on there. And I think it's just so cool to be able to have these chats about making connections. What was it like for you in Australia? What was it like for people in America, all over the world? There's a lot of commonalities that we can come together and feel supported in that space as well. And I think that's what me and Conall are going to be chatting about today, is a coming together from a home, from the same place back home, but also what we found across the world too, on our travels and on our different journeys as we're going along. So I'm really excited to have Conall on board today. So let's stop me talking and get him on the show. So Conall, hello. Thank you for waking up. I know I've just finished school and I got paint everywhere. We were painting today, so I've got paint all over my hands. But thank you for waking up and joining us today. So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself and and you being on today.
Yeah, I'm just in my makeshift office here in the utility room. But obviously I grew up in Derry, not far from you. I went to school in Derry as well, and then I finished up until 2011. And moved to Dublin for university, did business and law in EES3 for 5 years. So throughout school, I had a big interest in sport. So when I went down to EES3, I was playing rugby there. I was lucky enough to get a rugby scholarship. Finished up in 2016. Decided it's time for me to go traveling, so I spent a year in Australia, worked in there for a year, and came home, did a bit of traveling on the way home. Finally finished up back in Dublin, where what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I'm going to qualify as a PT. So I was in that for a couple of months, and then I decided an opportunity came up to move into the corporate world in Deloitte. So now, since Deloitte, nearly 3 years, I've been working in Deloitte as a consultant in the human capital team. And that's from me.
I think that's what really you do, bring that perspective of like all different paths of life. I think that's the title of this show, is like change and like how you've adapted through different careers. And I think that's what I really wanted to bring you on the show to have a chat about. This is like, for me, for example, I've always wanted to be a teacher. Like that's been my dream. I was like teaching my kids, teaching my like Ryan and like Kevin about like what they need to be doing. And like it's always been my dream to be a teacher. And I think for me that's been a very like sequential model towards like going between the different spaces of school and like life. But I think for like you and so many of our peers, even coming from Limerick Christie, like there's been so many people who have been like, okay, I'm out in the world now. Is that actually what I want to do? Is it not what I want to do? And I think that's what perspective you bring to the table in that space is. And I think even when I approached you, you were saying about how you've been kind of like being like, where am I at? What am I doing with my space now too? Especially like that. Yeah. Has this year kind of made you question things about what you're doing or what you're in your space you're in?
Yeah, like when you come out of school and you're sort of thrown into university and you're thinking, well, I'll just enjoy this now rather than what's my career. I know it's more specific when you're doing things in medicine or whatever. But like I did such a generic course that was like business and law, like how there's such a vast majority of jobs that I could have entered. I think that's something that like that you're constantly questioning whether or not you're doing something that you're 100% passionate about. And like some people are very lucky. They find that as soon as they come out of school, come out of university. But it's something that I've sort of been going from PT and the integration consultant within Deloitte, just such a massive jump. But sort of just, for me, it's been a matter of trial and error. jumping from thing to thing. So it's something that's constantly on my mind in a good way. So looking at what challenges is next, and certainly.
I think that's what I really liked about it. I know we'll maybe come into it later on as well, but I love like those videos like over the whole month. So obviously part of this is mental health and mental well-being and keeping yourself healthy and mentally and physically. And I've loved those stories of you and your voice like coming out of the water, like with the water, like spraying your jeans, because you have been trying to raise money for mental health in the past month as well. So how's that been with the challenge? Obviously this theme is challenge and accountability. So with the very first day getting into the water and the very last day, how do you find those two differences?
Like, it's amazing how you look back at it and you're sort of thinking, well, that was so quick. But at the time, it's waking up every day being like, oh my God, there's 27 days left, sort of thing. But the challenge was freeze-free. So it was basically get in the water every day for the equivalent time of the date. So you start off February 1st, you get in for 1 minute. And obviously you go right down through to 28 minutes. But it was created by this guy, Damien Brown, who's a rugby player and explorer. He created like a mental physical challenge 2 years ago to raise awareness for mental health. So since then, it's picked up huge. Like they had thousands of people doing it this year. And I think they raised over €100,000 for mental health charities. So I did mine for Mental Health Ireland, and the support was crazy. Like I think I raised over €2,500 for Mental Health Ireland, which was. It's funny when you do those things, you sort of think, and like I set my target for €500 because I was like, I should my parents to give me a couple €100 or whatever. But then, and there's so much support then from your friends and family, which is huge.
I think that ties into kind of what we are talking about today is what skills we set up with, what skills we not set up. And I think that's what, like, we talked about this like a lot when we meet up at Christmas time or like things like that. And like mental health is so important for, like, that's why I done my fight. Like I put it towards like youth flying back in New Zealand and talking with people actually talking about what they're going through. And it's really great to like that you are in that space, but also people listening from all across the world. Ireland is not warm at the minute. Ireland is not warm at any point really. Like sometimes when you're in the summer and you're like, it's still cold weather, but February time, having to get in the water at this time is not an easy thing. So well done for putting that in that space too.
So they called it freeze-free because obviously playing with words of February, but the reason they picked February was because it's the cold temperature of the water throughout the year. Oh my God, it's cold.
Well, I think that kind of ties into kind of what we are about, like in a fun way, but also like and tying into the next question. The first question we're going to be thinking about is like, why did you do it? But also, what do you think, like with school? Do you think what was one of the things that really prepared you for like life in general? So going across like those different jobs that you've done, going across like the world and travel in different spaces and not where you are now, even the past like a couple of months of COVID, like what do you think that first question is? Like, how did school prepare you for the future professionally or personally? What do you think about that?
Yeah, like looking at this, it's sort of not like there's a lot there. Like I probably learned more from school than what I realized. I mean, so obviously we shared the same school in Derry. Like there was a big focus on academia. I know Shane talked about that as well. But when I look back at the good things, like it definitely, the impact it had on my ability to study, huge. So it's obviously something that you're never really going to get away from. Like we all know people get exams right through university. Even like I wasn't expecting, like I moved into. So like when I talked about training as a PT, like I had to do exams for that. Like I was sitting there back. It was almost like I was back in school doing biology, all the muscles of the body sort of thing. And then when I moved into Deloitte, then I had more exams specifically around like integrations and stuff. So when you look back at the importance of developing those skills into how to study, it's huge. I mean, so that's something that sort of take for granted at the time because you're sitting there studying for levels and it's only outside. And what you want to do is go out and play the ball with or whatever, go out and see your friends. But
I think that's so important because I think at the minute, like the reason why I'm doing this, like we just said before we came online, I think for me as a teacher, there's so many jobs out there that I don't even know they exist at the minute. And as a teacher trying to prepare these kids for the future, like, and trying to not even know what's out there. So that's why I wanted to put this together to see what is needed. And I think it is a common theme towards like testing or testing yourself. So even like in my last session, I was talking to an MMA fighter like Brad, and he was saying that perseverance, like dedicating yourself to actually getting stuff when you might not want to do it as well. Like it's actually like sometimes with tests that we didn't want to do it, but we had to do it. So even those skills of getting on with something that might not be your passion as such, and you have to get your head down, because sometimes life isn't you get to focus on your passion every single day, every single minute. Sometimes you have to just get on with it. And I think that's what I kind of agree with, is like those testing parts, but also the knowledge is actually really important too. So trying to get those skills and those testing skills, like focusing and perseverance is really important. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Another one that popped up for me was time management. When you look at the way our school was structured, that we had, it was like 8 or 9 days throughout the day of actual classes, like in 30 and 35 minutes. So I sort of thinking back at memories, like 30 minutes and you have to points for next class. You're always constantly whatever. Like a few times, like I might have skipped a few classes and don't get the attention or something. That's something that I like looking at it. It's the skills that you develop without realizing. Show kids that they are managing their time or their skills around studying, and there's nothing to make them aware of, you know what I mean?
And I think like actually I'm just gonna pause because I think I'm just hearing a bit of like noise crack, because it was fine up until there now, but it's kind of crackling a little bit whenever you're speaking. Can you try again?
Is that better?
Yeah. It's a bit better actually, yeah, because it was just crackling a little bit just whenever you respond. It was fine for most of the session, but there now it was just cracking a wee bit. Like try again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear now. Yeah, so maybe we might have to just like go off and on a little bit as we're going along. I'll just let you know if it's but yeah, I think it's like so it's time management is like, and trying to like that. Did you say you got a detention?
Yeah.
For being late to like for your space? Yeah.
Yeah. Like it was I think it was history. I did. And there was a few of us that missed it, to be fair. So then we got punished. But that was our schools. That was, like Shane mentioned, that it was a strict school, and it's obviously a good thing and a bad thing, because it puts you in line and to a certain extent, and then you understand then the importance of it. Then at the time, obviously, you're young and you just want to run around the place, like.
I think, and it's so true. Like even when I'm with my kids at the minute, like you have to teach them, and that's what Brad was also saying. Like and Shane, like discipline is really important. Like they both said discipline, as in like discipline, because sometimes I'm like passion can kind of be like where you're getting the learners to like explore and understand, but sometimes they have to understand that you are accountable. Again, go back to like the theme of this month is accountability is important. So keeping the learners accountable for what they're actually doing too. So it's like, and I think that's what I really liked is, and Keisha, even because we also got people coming in from around the world. So we got Keisha back on today, and she's saying like time management and sustained focus, life skills that tie in with self-management. And I think that's what we are trying to do in education at the minute, is talking about self-management, agency of like over your own learning and holding yourself accountable. So like you said, I agree with like that side of it, like as in like you were kind of getting punished for maybe like, which is to do with accountability, but it's also what does that look like? So like detention, was that like the next step? Like did you learn from that at the time, or do you look back now and say that helped me? So it's like, how do we actually get the self-management? What does it look like in schools? So yeah, I like that part of it.
And then the accountability part as well it's so important, because through Freeze-Free, I made myself accountable by telling everyone that I was going to do the challenge. And there was times where, I remember the first 2 weeks, it was like we had this beast from the east come in from Russia. There was like a weather warning that was dropping the minus temperatures. And, like the 7th or 8th day, I remember the lads was like, oh man, I can't. I don't think I'll be able to do this because it's going to be so cold. But just having that accountability of knowing that people were like expecting me to complete the challenge, it drove me through. I find that a lot of ways as well around like in work or when I was PTing. Like I remember when I was learning to become a personal trainer, the personal trainer was teaching us was always talking about why he is a personal trainer, because just because you're a personal trainer yourself or a coach or a teacher, it doesn't mean that you do the things yourself. That's why you need to be accountable to someone, even if you're at the highest level. I think accountability is huge as well for learning and development.
I love that. I think it's so true. I think because sometimes in positions of power, you might not think that you have to look at yourself. Like it's that mirror thing I can't remember who I was talking to, but like it's about holding the mirror up and saying, what am I doing? I might be talking the talk, but am I walking the walk towards what I'm doing? So I agree. I think it is really, it's no matter what level you're at. And I think like that does, and I guess we talked about this a couple of times and even with my parents afterwards, we talk about what I'm talking about with you guys and things like that. And we have a couple of times said, like, developmentally, can you be accountable for your actions? Like developmentally, like, can you look at yourself and say, like you said, you were told off for being on detention. Like, why can I not just do my thing with my friends? But now you look back and say, okay, I get why they were putting those things in place for me. They were training me and helping me to see what I didn't see at that time. So it's like, how can we put those things in place? The kids might not know what they're getting yet, but it is going to help them be more productive or be more aware of themselves as they move forward into more awareness times. So yeah. And I think that kind of ties into like, that's one thing that you were taught. And I'm maybe feeding in now to like the next question of what do you wish you were taught at school? And what would have helped you later on in life? So yeah, so I think I'll just pause for a second because it's really cool to have Keisha on board. And like, if anyone is listening or everyone wants to join in, we are live, so you can tweet out hashtag empathetic_educators or hashtag 21st century skills, 21st century jobs, and you can join in the conversation as well. So it's really great to have you on, Conall, and then people who are actually joining in, they can feed into the conversation too. So what do you think that you were, that you weren't really, or you wish that you were taught at school, and you think it's important that you've learned after you've left?
Yeah, so obviously there's a few things that stand out for me. Wait
a minute, I'm going to pause because can we refresh it?
Refresh.
Like that, yeah, sweet, yeah.
Yeah, so speaking about mental health and freeze brain, that challenge, so that was something that I look back on. I don't think I heard the term mental health even through university, never mind school. And we all know now from COVID and like the last years, importance of mental health and how it's actually impacting everyone, no matter where you're from, what your background is, like how mentally stable you are, there is an impact on it. So it's sort of, for me, as it developed, it was sort of taboo in Ireland. And now people are realizing the importance of it. Like it's the idea of, you hurt your arm, like you go to the physio, you go to the doctor. Whereas if you're not mentally right, you feel like put down or whatever, then people don't do anything about it anymore. It hadn't been, and that's something that's developing now. It's huge. I'm not sure if that is something that's been brought into schools at the moment, but for me, it was definitely something that should have been taught, because it's a hard life lesson, and we have to learn ourselves or seek out help as an adult or as a teenager growing up. Like, I've been lucky, a good family, good support network, and so for me, it's always something that I was able to develop with people. I suppose that's why I did that challenge as well, was because it was a mental challenge, which was just to see how far I could actually take it, mentally and physically. But it's something that I'm not sure how kids would react to it, but I think it's definitely something.
I think it's so important. Like, that's exactly why Empathetic Educators is all about empathy, find out about neuroscience, find out about understanding what's going on in the brain. And I think it is definitely, like you say, it's coming in more into education more and more, and people are trying to put it in. But I think we go back to what you said about, like, if you're sick, you will go to a doctor. But it's also like, you're the epitome of like going to the gym. You've always been one of those boys that were like, Conall, you're like the big rugby boy, and like you go to the gym to train yourself, like even before you're sick. So like you're training all those muscles and you're training yourself to be strong. And then if you break an arm, then you're like recovering. But I think for me as well, it's about being mentally healthy, like, like that mental health side of it, but being mentally healthy. So looking after your brain, looking after those, like you say, you had a support system to rely on. So talking to people before it gets to a mental health issue as well. So obviously with mental health issues, there's lots of things, but how can we help our learners actually being more aware of continually looking after yourself, being aware of the breathing side of it. Like that's what I loved about you guys when you were breathing, like even in the water, you were like, like there's so much things that go into like your actual mental healthiness before you even have to go to the doctor and look after yourself too. So I agree. Yeah, it's a big part.
Yeah, it is huge. And like it's something as well that personal to everyone. So everyone goes through everyone has their own story. And it's exactly like that. It's almost like the prehab rather than the rehab. If you do the prehab, then you won't have to do.
Ooh, I like that.
Get that down.
And I'm gonna. That's a little quote there. I like that. Prehab versus rehab. Go ahead. Keep talking.
Yeah. Well, looking as well, what did I think that I missed from school in terms of what I think they should help me? I think what careers are out there was a big one. Because like you know yourself from our friends, whatever, we had our year group was what 120 students. And from that I'd say 50% of them ended up going on to medicine. You could say another 20-30% went on to law, and I was a part of that as well. So it just felt like we did obviously small careers talks and stuff throughout our final year, but it felt like we never actually knew what was outside of the big, be a lawyer, be a doctor, whatever, engineer. So understanding the broad range of careers, like look at me, I am working for Deloitte as an integrations consultant. If you had said that to me when I was 18, I'd be like, what are you talking about?
What even is that?
Yeah. And especially for me as well, like going through school, I was so passionate about sport. So in my head, the reason I went to university was to play rugby. You know, like I was lucky enough to get that scholarship. But I played rugby with people that I knew down in Dublin, and that was the time of my life in terms of I didn't care about going into constitutional law lectures or learning about accounting. It was all about playing rugby. You know? So the focus on academia in Living Christie, our school, it outweighed the importance of sport and for other people like music and stuff. So I think what should be important is making sure that balance is there, like because not everybody needs to be a lawyer, not everybody needs to be going into a career of medicine or whatever. Just as an example, so like I know I missed like rugby tournaments and stuff because of school. That doesn't necessarily like I should be in a position where I was growing from sport and growing from school, and not just school. So I think that's that's a main point. One of the main points for me is to make sure that there's a balance there and learning about like, education as well as the importance of like sport, music, and stuff.
And I think that's been a big conversation, like at the minute, like I think even as a teacher, that's why I want to do this, is like to understand what jobs are actually out there. Because like at the minute, if I'm not doing this, then I'm kind of in my own little bubble of helping kids become it. But I haven't been in the working sphere ever. Like I've only ever been a teacher. So I don't really, the jobs that I grew up with was teachers, lawyers, dentists, doctors, like. And so if I am not asking these questions, then, and I think that's, you're so right, is like, how can we help teachers actually understand what jobs are available out there? Or even how can we help learners look for themselves? And I think just like you said about that space, about like the sports space, it's actually valuing what the kid brings to the table, what the learner brings to the table, valuing what their passions are, but also letting them see other sides of it too. So I think it's like the both sides of the sphere. And I think that's why I really enjoyed why I'm really enjoying bringing you onto because you had such like representing under 18s for Ireland, like actually be getting to go there and train. And that was such a big part of your sequence and your progression. So it's like, how can we, like you missing out on rugby tournaments for school? Like that was halting your actual career towards what you were working towards, but also it's like an and. So we always talk on here about and-ands rather than either ors, and so it's like an and of how can we value where they're at and their actual talents, as well as bringing on like the conversations of like education and academia, because like you say, we have taken away from that side of academia. but it might not have been your full potential going in that space too. So it's like really important to have both the and of like, do you think for you, how do you feel like that did support you or didn't support you in your journey with rugby? Like obviously you went, what age did you go straight into the under 18? So you were doing that alongside education?
Yeah. So I was 16, like playing for our province, which had been Ulster at the time. So I'd been traveling up into Belfast, Cookstown, like 2 or 3 times a week when I was 16 to 18. And then I was lucky enough to get a call up for Ireland club team, under 18. This was all sort of going on in the background. I was studying for health.
Pause. Can you refresh again? Yeah, go ahead. I don't know why, but yeah, it's fine. It's just long you're fresh and it's fine.
Yeah, so I don't know that was sort of going on in the background for me when I was trying to study for A levels and get into university. But I think, yeah, you're dead right. I like that and that's something that wasn't there. It was school, then rugby. Do you know what I mean? And like it's sort of unfortunate as well. Derry itself is not really known for rugby, and it's no fault of Lumen Christie's. It's not like a lot of it depends on the school system itself and the teachers that are involved, what their background is. Like I know in our school there was a big emphasis on like say netball and GA. There wasn't really rugby. Like we had rugby on a Friday after school with an external coach. So it's something that I had to develop myself outside of school and use the club system through City of Derry and then through Ulster and into Ireland then. But it's definitely something that if I had the chance to develop it within school, then I probably maybe might have taken that extra step. Sure, who knows at this stage. I had a great journey, but it is just that highlighting of the importance of balancing sport and education instead of putting one in front of the other.
And I think it's like the value, making the person feel valued in what they're hearing. Because even like Keisha at the moment, like she's talking about the mental health side of things and like adding into that space and like saying that mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to their community. And I think the idea of realizing their own abilities, because like she was on the show like in season 2, Keisha, and she was talking about her like her son and her son's journey, and she's so amazed at her son having his own value and keeping his own core. And he's not looking externally at like his results to get his core. He is working on his own core and keeping his own values inside. And I think that's so important for what we're talking about at the minute, is value in the person in front of us, where they are versus where we think they should be. And I think like that's what we're talking about at the minute is like, yes, it's sport and education. But like, even like you just said there now, like some teachers, and I know for one, I've like taught sports, like it's like I don't have a clue. I put my hand up and I'm like, I'll support it, I'll try it, because you want to value, but you also like might not have that expertise in that space. Like I know for a fact I've like put my hand up for things that I don't have a clue about because that system isn't there. So it's how can we value it enough to put the system there instead of like it only going into the other areas that like might get more money. It's how can we actually like understand what the different needs are as well between like the two. So yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like also we have Miss Clark. It's so good to have like the people joining them. We have Mrs. Clark coming in from Newcastle, and it's a great discussion, guys, with regards to looking after ourselves. One strategy would be giving some quiet time for people each day, and I think that's so important. Like going back to like the mental health side of things, like that quiet time, and actually like understanding how we can process things and reflect on things, and just take that time a little bit to like be okay with being a little bit independent too. And like, yeah, but also I look back at like looking at you and all the boys, I'd be like, what type of quiet time would you be having? Could you actually be quiet in those spaces? I don't know.
I know. I think when you put students into one room and try and ask them to be quiet, something's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it goes again, like going back to putting the importance of it. So like I definitely noticed if I intentionally create quiet time, so I'm like creating little bubbles, like creating the space for them to actually be there, they respond well to that. But if I just say to them, be quiet, like let's just all be quiet together, like there's no chance that's going to happen. And even more so, I can picture my kids doing it versus I can picture you and the boys and the girls from our school doing it. I look back at my kids and like us being kids, and I'm like, if someone's telling me to be quiet, would I have actually done it? I don't know. But like I can definitely see now where I've set up intentional spaces for my kids to be quiet. Like maybe some of them choose to do some reading during quiet time. They choose to do some coloring. So it's given that ownership back onto them. What do they want to do during that quiet time instead of it just being quiet? It's given them that choice to actually say, this is what we can do as an option as well. So yeah.
I think that's what I developed was always asking why, making sure.
Oh, wait a minute. Refresh yourself again.
Okay. So what I was saying was, I was coaching. I was always told to ask why. The person understands why they're doing it. I think that's the point you're making there. If you tell a kid or the students quiet just off the bat, and they don't understand why they do it, then it's a ruckus. But if they understand that it's for themselves and this is a development item of whatever, then they can understand that, well, maybe I might get something from it. And I suppose that's just the point I'm making, is always asking why, and then making sure that everyone understands why.
Having them have a seat at the table. I think that's like having them have a seat at the table and say that they're part of the discussion, not like done to, it's done with. Like they're part of that like understanding of why they're doing it, but also they have a say in it, because like that's like they have a say in actually what's going on to them. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about that valuing the person where they are and actually being able to support them in that space too. So yeah, I love it. I love it. You're saying about asking why, and then that prehab versus rehab. That's I like that, Conall, that prehab versus rehab. And then the very last thing is, what 3 skills or qualities should be taught to help learners? I think we touched on that, but maybe just like recap on what we talked about and what are the 3 main priorities for you. Pause before you do it, and pause and put it off and on, so it might help with like the thing.
Yeah, so I looked at this question, sort of wanted to tie it in with freeze ray and what I learned from that. I might cheat and put in 4 if that's right.
Oh wow. Okay.
First one was patience. That was something that I was just sitting there in the water, and I had a few lads with me doing it or whatever, and we were just constantly like, geez, we'd love to just do the 28 minutes today, because we felt that once we got to like the high teens and the 20s, we could definitely stay in for 28 minutes. It was just going to be as cold. But it's just that we couldn't. I mean, it had to be every day, so we had to be patient. Something that obviously it's an obvious trait that we're aware of that is important. You don't really realize how important it is until you're put in a situation where you need to wait. So that's definitely my first one.
Patience. I like that. Pause and put yourself back on again, just so in between each one, so then we can actually listen to you. I don't know why it's happening like that, but it's once you pause and put it on, it's fine, but just making sure that it's going on. Patience. Next one.
So the next one then was mindset. This is something that I stole from Wim Hof, which is known as the Iceman. Stuff in the snow, basically. But he talks a lot about mindset, and I realized how important that was, because every day I was going down the water, like, you know, that a bit of nerves around it. And then when you're in the water, then it was like it's the constant battle with your brain. Because obviously your body doesn't want to be in a position where it's uncomfortable. So it wants to be, it's constantly telling you, get out. What are you doing this for? I'm freezing, get out. So it was that change of mindset to try and understand why you're doing it, and constantly reinforce the fact that you can do it. I think that was huge for me, because after, say, day 11, that's when I got to the stage where I can do this. Whereas before that, I was looking at it from, oh no, what's the impact, like, sort of thing. So I had to shift my mindset as the challenge went on. Actually, I got on it, then that's the changing mindset. So, big mindset.
Okay, I think going back, go off and on, and
Yeah.
and I think like that those kind of change together. So like I love that mindset part of it, because me having my fight like in 2019, even now, like, so I was watching the Izzy fight at the weekend, and I was like, I got in the ring. Was that crazy? Like I got in the cage, and like, but I remember being that time, like before the fight, I remember my mindset trying, like you say, like your mindset goes to try and trick you to be like, just don't do it, like fake it, don't do this, don't do that, it's fine. But I had to like hush my own brain to say, no, I'm here, I've trained for it, I want to do this, like let me do this, rather than like, see, like your mindset, you're constantly trying to be aware of like that negative self-talk and that positive self-talk of like what it means to like keep yourself, but like patience and perseverance and mindset coming together. So like being patient, getting yourself in a zone, getting yourself in a space where you can control yourself. I really like those two because they really do tie together. Because I remember just being like looking at Izzy at the weekend. I was like, I could actually get in the cage. Like, who am I? Like, what was my mind doing at that point? But it was you really had to hold your nerve, and it's really important for our kids to understand that.
That's where the big part of the mental health challenge comes in. It's that battle of the negative thoughts versus the positive. And that sort of thing, that's when you can overcome that then, when the positive outweighs the negative then, and then you start to realize that you are feeling good about it.
So yeah, number 3.
So the last one then is, second last. Third one was preparation. So I started to realize that like I was developing a routine of going in. And the better I prepared, then the better that I was able to heat up as I came out. So I had things like having a flask of tea or coffee or whatever. And I would hold my clothes in a way that when I came out of the water, I'd do it in order of putting the water over. So it was something that at the start I was all over the place. Like I was getting out of the water, my feet were on the wind was like hitting me sideways, like rain was coming in, and I was just getting colder and colder as I was going out of the water. So I was like, I really need to be on top of what I'm doing, and that's where preparation came in. So I would spend like 15-20 minutes in the morning and like prep made sure I had my like fluffy socks and stuff, like a hot water bottle, and have the stuff ready to go, and then straight into the car and just. So it was the small wins for me that was able to bring me through the challenge easier. Because one of the most important parts was to make sure that you're not getting colder as you're going out. That's where preparation came in and helped me do that.
I love that. That's so cool. Like, I think I'm voting for you to do a TED Talk on this. What things I learned from Freesbury. There you go. I'm putting myself forward for you to be like, I know we still have one more to go, but I'm like, that's so cool. Like all those things you've learned from that space is. But I think it's like we've talked about. Sometimes things can be so big that you don't even know where to start. And I think like that, like you just thinking about like the 1 minute versus 28 minutes and everything you learned along the journey, from taking like the smaller step to the smaller step to the bigger step to the bigger step to the biggest step. All those little tweaks that you had to do that made that biggest step that you wouldn't have been able to do at the start, but through those little tweaks along the way, you actually made it so much easier for yourself. So it's about starting your journey small and then getting bigger and bigger and understanding it more and more as we go along. So yeah, I love that. Off and on, and then
like that was it was funny because when people like look at me and say, what are you doing? There's crazy or whatever. It wasn't actually being in the water that was the hardest part, if that makes sense. It was doing it every day. It was getting ready every day. It almost became that when you got into the water, it was exciting because, I'm nearly finished today's one. And that sort of leads into the next point then, which was support. So support was, like I looked at it as company within the water. So like I said, the first few weeks that's when the beast release was coming in. So like the temperature, I think, was like really feeling like -8 degrees Celsius. And like you'd be in the water by yourself And you know yourself, when you try and do anything alone, it feels twice as long. If I told someone to sit there for 8 minutes by themselves, not speaking, not looking at their phone or whatever, it almost feels like a lifetime. Never mind when you're sitting in cold water. So for the first 2 weeks, I was heading down there myself, without anybody around me for a few. Like, I did have some people for a couple of days, but the days I was on my own, I was really, I'm thinking, Jesus, this really highlights the importance of mental health, because it looks at making sure that people aren't alone, especially now with COVID and stuff. But as I headed into the final 2 weeks, and that's when I linked up with the other guys that were doing it. So there was 4 of us total. And the difference then in my ability then to get through the challenge was incredible, because you just sit there in the water and you just be chatting away, and you'd look at the watch and they'd be like, you'd only have like 2 minutes left. And you're like, oh, class, happy days. Whereas by myself, that would have been, you would be constantly checking the watch every 2 minutes. So that sort of brought the challenge to its head, where I was thinking, this is why it's such a mental challenge, because it highlights for people who are alone and like feeling down. That's why support is so helpful, because it's a distraction. It helps people heal in that sense. So I thought that was too important to leave out.
Well, considering what you worded it so beautifully, I'll let you have the 4th one. I'm really glad you put that in, because honestly, I love these chats, because I don't even know what I'm going to get out of them. I don't know the person, I know what's happening, but like, thank you so much for sharing, like, and putting all those things in place, because it's so true. Like, it's exactly the reason why you were doing it. You learned why you were doing it on the journey, and it's like, it's so powerful with that space is, you realize the importance of the journey, and you realize the importance of the people on it. Exactly the same as me within my fight. So I was doing that for mental health and getting my own self, my head, that I knew I wanted to be accountable for me. But and me getting in the cage, it was for me to help myself. But I would never be able to get in that cage without all the other people there cheering me on, or like people like the week before I had to talk to Rob, and I was like, I'm not doing it. No, thank you. No, thank you. I am not getting in that cage. And but like, I was told to Rob, and Rob was like, well, you've done this, you've done that, like, you've prepared this, you prepared that. So like, by myself, I would have been getting myself in that downward spiral of constantly going down and down and down. But through talking to him, and like, obviously not as vocal as now, I was like crying my eyes out, being like, I cannot fight next week, what am I doing? But like, he was able to say, well, look at what you have done, and that perspective change, and that perspective that you're able to talk to someone else and have that space is like, it's such a powerful message. Thank you, Conall, in that space. I think like Keisha's like mentioned as well, is going back to your preparation note, is like, preparation could also look at routines and frameworks that scaffold success in the classroom. So what you're talking about is what you've experienced in your journey, but bringing that back to the kids and preparing them. So like we talked about the little small wins to get to the big one, and scaffolding those little conversations as well. Yeah,
like those 4 points, like, when I was looking at them, I was sort of thinking, are they answering your question? But it's something that we do learn in school, we just don't realize to a certain extent. And then
we do learn, but also like the intentionality behind it. Like, it's almost like sometimes they're a byproduct of something that we're already doing, or like they might be like, but it's like, how can we actually intentionally set those things up as teachers? Like, so like, obviously I'm taking this from a teacher angle, is me thinking about what you're talking about. Yeah, that's really reinforcing the importance of it. So sometimes, like you said at the very start, it's not just academics, it's the and of the intentionality behind the preparation and all those things, helping the kids with it. It's like the and part of it too. So yeah, really valuing them.
Yeah, of course. So it's mindset, preparation, patience, and support.
Well, I think I could talk to you all day about this, to be honest. I think I'm gonna get you back on, and I think you need to do a TED talk. If I'm being honest, I think this needs to be something that you pursue more, because that's quite like that's really concise the way you've just talked about those things, Conall. So thank you very much for sharing your insights in it. I think at the very end we're just going to talk about obviously we know that there's a green theme going on because we're from Derry at the minute, and we always have a little like takeaway to say like about your part of the world or somewhere that you visited. So you chose to share us about something, a little fun fact in the world. Where is this, and what are you going to talk about?
So this is the Peace Bridge in Derry. Obviously, it was built to connect the city side, the water side. Obviously, Derry is such a messy past, let's say. So this was sort of bridging the gap between city side and the water side. So This is a photo I took over Christmas. Like, this was built in 2011, so we didn't really get to fully enjoy it because we left school. I was off to university then, and I haven't actually lived in Derry since fully. When I was home over Christmas, I got a chance just to walk around and sort of thought, this is a great picture. But it made me appreciate like what we have at home and stuff. And it's something that you don't realize, but if you travel around and live away from home, then come back.
Putting yourself back on mute again. Yeah, going away and coming back. You appreciate like the
how important it is to come back and sort of link up with friends again and see your family and stuff. And there's a lovely walk there around there if anybody wants to come back to go around for a walk. But yeah, it was just something that I actually got to enjoy because obviously we weren't able to do much throughout Christmas because of COVID. So walking around and stuff was nice to see there.
I love that, and I think that's exactly why I want to do like this session. Is like sometimes you can go whatever. Because I'm the same. I haven't been at home since 2011, which is so crazy, isn't it? Like that's actually so mental that we haven't permanently lived at home since like that space. And I think like that's exactly what I agree with. Is like that appreciation for the people that where you've come from and where you're moving to. I think that's why I want to do this segment is like trying to get people from Derry because they're doing like amazing things. Like trying to really appreciate. Even though I love being away and I love traveling, home's home and it's always going to be home. So it's like that space of appreciating where you've come from, which is our beautiful town of Derry. I love that. And then appreciating what else you get from around the world too. So I have loved this session. I wasn't too sure. Us on going back home at Christmas is a very different type of Conall and Naomi around our Christmas table. But yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to be professional. Same as me and Shane being professionals as well as having a bit of fun too. So yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get that back then this Christmas. We can link up again and catch up on the year we missed this year.
I think Madge will be very happy about that for trying to get us around that Christmas table again. So yeah.
No.
Well, thank you, Conall, for coming on, and I hope if anyone wants to see Conall, or can people still contribute to the things that you've raised, or is that closed now?
They can. Well, it's not officially closed. It's sort of so there's two charities, Peter House and Mental Health Ireland. You can still donate, but there's other challenges now that people have taken forward. Breezebury thing sort of moves from end of January, charity-wise, end of January, right through to the first week of March. But obviously, if you want to contribute to Mental Health Ireland or any mental health charity, then
yeah, definitely. It's a big positive. So, but you do have your stories on. People can see down here, Conall Doherty. If you want to see Conall getting out of the water with all those boys and and swinging their hair, people can see that on at Conall Doherty and just supporting that space too. So yeah, thank you, Conall, for coming on, and I've really enjoyed our chat. And prehab versus rehab, I love that side of it with being mentally healthy. So I'm really looking forward to it. And this is the end of our season 3. So I've been really happy for all those people involved. If you are watching, you have some takeaways, and let us know, #empathetic_educators. We're going to be coming up with more in the new season as well. So in the new season, we have coming up, we're going to be looking at systems and looking at why systems are important for us to look at too. So on Thursday, we have Nina coming up. And Nina's going to be looking at the neuroscience and education. How can it help? How can it hinder? So we have that coming up on Thursday live, coming out at 4 p.m. Tokyo time, or anywhere else around the world too. So thank you again, Conall, for coming on. And that is the end of our show. Thank you. Bye. Bye, guys. Bye.